Welcome to the Life as an Observer podcast. My name is Ryan Bean. I am your host in self-observation. This podcast is an exploration of physical and non-physical self through discussion around yoga, meditation, self-improvement, self-realization, and practices that elevate the mind, body, soul connection. Let's start observing. Today on Life as an Observer, I had the unique opportunity to sit down with Jesse Coomer, a breath worker, a YouTuber, just someone who really knows the science behind why breath work works. Talking about how we can go deeper, talking about how we can heal. We discuss a lot of things, including our trip together to a retreat and future endeavors. Listen to Jesse. He has a lot to say in the way of science and why we have this new modality of healing. Not only that, but a lot of upcoming things that he's working on that I know you as my audience may find really, really interesting and something that you want to spend your time and money doing. Get ready. This is an amazing 1-hour episode with Jesse Coomer, breath worker and author of A Practical Guide to Breathwork and some other works. Give it a listen. Hey, Jesse. Good to see you.
Hey, nice to be here, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. So, we just saw each other a couple weeks ago, and
Yes.
and we've actually talked several times virtually using technology, and finally got a
Yep.
chance to hang out in beautiful Mandala Springs
Oh, yes.
in North Carolina. I understand you're going back there this month. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. Let's see, the 15th and the 16th, we're going to do basically just another round, a Wim Hof Method fundamentals on Saturday and a Wim Hof Method advanced on Sunday. But you know how it was. It's kind of a combined, type of an experience. But hey, we want to leave it so that if a person wants to, they can just come one day, and that's free for.
We'll call it a weekend of breath and cold.
Yes.
just really training. So I guess that's where we start here. Is I'm a facilitator of breath work, and I do meditations and I do yoga, and I get asked all the time, "Hey Ryan, what do you do for work?" And it's so fun to I just kind of hand them my contact card, which I use as a little popple, I'm going, that's what I do. But when people ask you, what do you do for work? How do you respond? What is your title to them?
It is so hard to answer the question because I want to just say I'm a breath worker, right? And then the first, then I see kind of like a few different reactions. The first one is people are just like, oh, okay. They kind of their eyes kind of glaze over. They're like, I don't even want to ask what that is and just going to move on. A lot of times I will say, I'll kind of adjust the title depending on the audience. So maybe I might say I'm a breath coach. Still, still
I use the word facilitator sometimes.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, I'm like, okay, at least they have an anchor in the word coach. They're like, well, I know what a basketball coach is.
Yeah.
So I'll say, I'm a breath coach. But another name, I haven't been using it much, but some of my friends have been using Pulmonat, the pulmonary system.
And I have not heard that one yet.
Yeah. So the Pulmonat, but at the end of the day, it is sometimes difficult to just kind of hammer down on it, but I do want to really normalize what the term breath worker is, though. Anybody who works with breath for any purpose, right? So I am a breath worker, and that's kind of what I prefer to be known as, but sometimes I'll say I'm a breath specialist or something like that as well. So I just try to make it understandable.
Yeah. Well, so when I first kind of came in contact with your work, I mean, it was a couple of years ago, and it was you were. I think one of the first videos I saw of you was just taking frost walks, and it was just like, let's go outside and put my feet into the snow. And at the time I was doing a lot of traveling, and I was in actually a warm climate, and I was like, well, that's not going to happen for me. I was living in, and now that I've moved, it does show its face, where I can do frost walks in
Yeah.
Utah, which is great. And it's been kind of part of my conditioning. But I know since then, your life has changed and you've kind of refined it a little bit. I know maybe it was a year and a half ago you released your ebook. Is that about right?
Yeah, it was I believe it was September of 2019.
Yeah.
And that was my first edition. And then September of last year, 2020, I came out with the second edition. And basically anybody who bought the first edition got the free upgrade. And
Yeah.
I what I'm doing is I'm just kind of I'm going to probably add another edition before I actually print it out and sell it as a paperback or something like that. But I just keep learning more things, and I keep thinking, oh yeah, that's another thing I should tell the people. You know,
So, so Jesse's book was a practical guide to cold immersion. Is that what it was?
yeah,
Forget
practical guide to cold training. Yeah,
cold training. Yeah, that
yeah.
was the first one. Was practical guide to cold training. It's an ebook. They can get it on your site. But and then you
Hmm.
released your paperback book, which I have a couple copies of, and even had you sign one of them when we got
Yes.
together. So the practical guide to breath work, which is just full of all kinds of goodies. It's a remedy for the modern human condition, which I love the subtitle to that, whatever, is the remedy for the modern human condition, because we find ourselves in that all the time.
Yes.
In the modern
Yes.
condition. And I have done a lot of healing modalities, being a yoga instructor,
Mm.
and working with pranayam, in India, and doing a lot
Hmm.
of work. And that actually helped me dive really deep. And I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm going to kind of tell you a little bit about
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
my story in India, and
Awesome.
how I got exposed to the cold, and how breath work actually happened to me. It wasn't given to, it was just sort of happened. So it's part of a rite of passage to go into Mother Ganga, into the Ganges River in northern India. If you're living there, and just sort of as a bath or a baptism, if you will.
Hmm.
It's not the cleanest river in the world, but it's also a very holy river.
Right.
So you get into it anyway. This is a glacier-fed river, and it's quite swift moving. And so I said, I'm going to do what that lady's over there doing, and I'm getting in. I got in and I got right back out. I did not do well the first time I got in. And so I said, I had it in my mind, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And I remember
Yeah.
it was the same thing over and over, like where I get in, nope, getting out. And finally I had someone who saw me with this struggle, said, you must use pranayam, you know.
Yep.
And so I said, okay, I gotta breathe. Okay. So, and at the time we were using the Kabal Balti, the
Oh yeah.
skull shining, to really reset the nervous system. And
Yeah.
then I was doing something that as I got into the water, I did some box breathing that I had learned when I was in the
Mhm.
military. And
Yep.
that is what opened it all wide open for me, where I was like, ooh, this
Hmm.
feels kind of nice. I can
Yeah.
do this. All right. So, as we do this work, I really find that, especially like when we were in Mandala Springs, that there is a connection to self through nature. There's just
Yep.
like this undenying like thing that happens
Yeah.
when you get into nature. And I kind of wanted you to talk about that a little bit in your practice, because the first time I was introduced to you and your work, you were doing frost walks,
Hmm.
in Illinois somewhere, and you were, and I crunching away as you're talking, and cars are passing by going, who's this crazy guy? And if you
Yeah.
can, just kind of talk a little bit about your practice and how nature really plays a big role in that.
Yeah, and I'll even bring it back to this thing. I've coined the phrase, the modern human condition, because this is something I think we suffer from more than we really realize, and I know I've suffered from it a lot in my life, and it's something that you don't have to suffer from it, if you understand what it is, and then you also understand how it affects us, right? And so now there's a lot of different ways that it affects us, but one of the primary ways is that the way that we are built and programmed is not for modern life, right? So you and I are both, we're talking to each other via the internet, both in square houses, and just there's nothing around me that is natural. I have a grounding pad that my feet are on right now, and that's not even really natural, but it's like trying to get close, right?
What is
And
it? Is it like a tray of dirt or what is it?
no, it's one of those pads like you plug it into the ground into to the like your
Oh,
outlet. And so it's basically now here's the thing. I bought it, I use it. It's something I have here whenever I work with my computer here, but it's still, it's not the same in my book. I mean, some people might make the claim, hey, you're grounded, so you're getting the same charge and all that. It's not the same as going out in nature. It's not the same thing
right.
as really facing these challenges to our body that we really have, and we need. And it's one of those things where, for instance, I think back to the concept of exercise is pretty new, really. Even though, people think it's been around forever, but really, even there was some time, there was a time whenever it was even considered bad for you. You better not exercise too much, because we just didn't understand. We really didn't know. But the Industrial Revolution and all the multiple industrial revolutions that we've seen, they've had deleterious effects on our health. And we eventually were like, you know what? I go down to the office and I press these buttons, and then I go home. My body feels terrible, as if I'm getting injured from not doing it. What is the deal? And then
Hmm.
we realized we had to supplement the life we used to have, or the life we have now, with part of the life we used to have, which is, we go to gyms now, we take runs, we do yoga, we do, things like that, things that engage the body in a challenging way. And it's something that, now yoga, that dates back ancient times. And there are forms of martial arts and some forms of exercise that what we would consider exercise nowadays that date back a long time. But the general consensus that you need to do really extraneous physical labor, right? There's no real product that you produce, right? It's not helping to feed you when you go, and go on a run, or you do push-ups, or you do, something like that. But it does give you the stressor. We all understand now that it gives you the stressors that you need to make yourself healthy. And a lot of times people say, hey, what are the benefits of breath work, or the cold? And I always come back with them sometimes, or at least sometimes I come back with them. If I have enough time to talk, right, I'll come back with them. I'll say, well, what are the benefits of exercise, right? And there's a lot of benefits. It's not just one thing, right? And so what I realized at some point was that, okay, I need to start exercising. I need to start engaging my body physically. And when you do that, you start engaging your mind, whether you realize it or not. I think most people, that's what keeps them out of exercise. That's what keeps them out of an active lifestyle, is actually the mind, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
whenever I got into physical training, and I got into weight training and things like that, I realized that there was still a lot left out there. And so I got into yoga, I got into meditation, found out I was terrible at yoga, or I was okay. I got better, but I found out I was terrible at meditation. And then I found breath work and cold exposure as I was searching for ways to become better at meditation. And what I found was, when we expose ourselves, our bodies and minds, to stress, and it's got to be the right amount of stress, right? It can't just be a little piddly thing that's nothing, right? It can't be, oh, that was nothing at all. It can't be so much that you're going to go die, right? But if you expose yourself to enough stress, if you challenge your body responds, and it expects. That's the thing I think we've forgotten, is that our body expects to be stressed to a certain level. And if it doesn't get it, then it actually changes. It adapts in a bad way. We would call it a maladaptation.
Yeah. I would say it's kind of like a bad dog. You know, if you think about it, you have like like a service animal, a dog that wants to work, a working animal.
Uh-huh.
And if you don't give them a task, then they end up tearing into your trash can, pulling out,
Yeah,
so you got to
it's
give them a
true.
job. You got to give them something to do.
Absolutely. And so when I realized that, okay, this is not just about showing off that I can go get into the cold. And there are benefits. like actual physical and measurable benefits to getting into the cold. And that's what it got me started. That's I would say with most things with fitness, with most things with physical and mental fitness, people look at what are the biochemical things that happen, right? So what parts of the brain light up? Oh, cool! I want that to happen. Happens to your cytokines? What happens to your white blood cell? All these different things. That's great. But what really got me was that, wait a minute, I can I can adapt. Like this is because the first time I took a cold shower, and I told you about this whenever I met you a couple
Yeah.
of weeks ago, but I'll tell it for those of you guys listening. The first time I got in the cold shower, I I just done Wim Hof method breathing, and so I felt invincible. And so I went to the shower, and I was like, well, I'm just going to take a cold shower. It's February in Indiana, it was just cold water coming out. But what I did, I just turned it straight on to cold. And actually, I said, it's kind of embarrassing, but I said Wim Hof, like as if it was some kind of incantation for strength. And as soon as the cold water hit my skin, I always liken it to the cartoons where the skeleton leaves the body,
Mhm.
you know, and then the rest of it is like a rubber band. It was that fast. And I don't know how fast you got out of the Ganges, but I got out of the shower really fast.
Oh, it was immediately. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was like not even out of the
exactly.
the area. Yeah.
And the thing is, what's so crazy to me is that was so, I mean, it was unbearable, right? It was
Yeah.
absolutely unbearable. And years later now, it's normal, right? I will take cold showers year round, and then I'll do all these other things. And then when it comes to the frost walks, okay, so when it came down to doing frost walks, there are very few medical benefits, if any, medical benefits to doing a frost walk, um, other than if you're doing it, yeah, and which is okay. I also do this. I'll walk around barefoot, but I'm also just in shorts, right?
Yeah.
Now, yes, you're going to get the cold exposure. There are many, biological benefits that you can get from that. But walking in the snow barefoot, there's really not any benefit that you're going to get from that, other than you do train your feet to be incredibly resilient, and you
Yeah.
improve the circulation a lot. I mean, there are benefits, I guess, but the biggest benefit for me, and the reason why I'm so hooked on it, is that it was impossible at one time, but I kept at it, and with the right mindset and control over my autonomic nervous system, control over my emotional state, and really controlling that fear, which is a very rational fear. Your body doesn't want to, die of hypothermia or lose toes, right? So it's giving you pain, but being able to lean into that with a sense of relaxation and just kind of surrender to the moment, I can I can meditate much better now than I did back in the day.
Yeah.
But you talk about a real test of your focus, your breath, and it's just exhilarating whenever you're like, wow, I'm more powerful than I thought I was. I've got more um strength than I ever thought I had. And that in itself is just it's hard to describe. It's just incredibly gratifying
There's some
to
power behind it. There's some
yeah.
power in just knowing it's like that inner confidence that lights up and says, "Wow, I just accomplished like a goal." You know, I still stand at the water sometimes and go, "Why am I doing this?" Okay, so
Oh
I'm not
yeah.
gonna
Oh yeah. I'll be there with you, my friend. Yeah.
like where I'm like, "What is going on?" Like I know, we were doing multiple dips in Mandala Springs. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. It's still cold. You still stand there and
Oh
look
yeah.
at it and go,
Oh
okay,
yeah.
I'm making a decision now to get
Hmm.
in. And, I have people that tell me all the time, we hear all this, I would, but it's cold. And, that's the common argument. But what I hear sometimes is like, especially those who are athletes,
where they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I've done that before.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was okay." But what I think is missing, and I want you to kind of talk on this. I think there's a major piece, which is one of the pillars of Wim Hof, is the mindset
Mhm.
piece. And so, can
Right.
you talk about that a little bit? The difference in athletic cold plunge
Yeah.
and cold immersion, mindful cold immersion.
Yeah, and first of all, I will say, regardless if you're doing Wim Hof method or if you're just doing cold training as a practice by itself, okay, there are a few things to understand when it comes to cold training, and that is that the athletic ice bath, okay, and you're in the United States, so I don't have to convert to Celsius, so thank you. But the athletic ice bath is generally going to be around 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, which is cold. Okay, there's no denying that is definitely a cold challenge on your system, and it has incredible benefits. And what'll happen is a lot of times a person who is an athlete will come and talk to me, and or they'll talk to someone who's maybe come to one of my workshops, and they'll say, "Yeah, I used to sit in ice baths for like 20 minutes. What's the big deal?" And the reality is, it's true. I mean, the reality is, okay, yeah, you were sitting in 60-degree water, 50-degree water, whatever. Yeah, that's pretty typical. And the reason why they do it that way is, and this comes back, if you guys have read my ebook, and if not, I explain a lot. This is deeper explained in my ebook, but the reason why they do it that way is because there's two different ways to get the benefits of cold training. You can either go really cold for a short amount of time, or you can go pretty cold for a longer amount of time. And the way your body works is your brain will secrete norepinephrine at a reliable, consistent rate that is repeatable as long as you live. So the interesting thing is, you and I, the very first time we had our first cold exposure, technically the brain chemistry was pretty much the same as when it comes to the beneficial chemicals that came out of our brains, but the difference was that we weren't able to control our reactions
Yeah.
to that cold, right? So when it comes down to controlling your reactions, that's one of the biggest challenges of cold training, right? And you're talking about it, and actually, I'm probably going to take an ice bath literally after we get done talking. It's waiting for me out there, and there's a certain degree of trepidation that always is like, yeah, do you really need to, you know? But that is that meditation, that is that focus, that is that practice. Now, when we look at the focus to when we get into an ice bath, for instance, if you get into an ice bath that I prepare, right, it's going to be 40 degrees, and I try to get it down to maybe 35 degrees.
Mhm.
And so it's super, super cold. And I would say at Mandala Springs, it was definitely in the low 40s.
Yeah.
And on the second day, it was even colder because we actually had a
It was
nice
overcast.
frost. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that morning, we even got a little bit of snow that came down, and it melted pretty quickly. But it was definitely a little higher up the mountain. So, but the thing is, you've got this shock, right? The body receives these signals, and it says, okay, if we stay in this too long, it could be lethal. It will be lethal. And so the part of your brainstem is there to try to help you survive and not die. And so what we do when we do Wim Hof method, or whenever we do just, I mean, any kind of cold training specifically, and this is why we focus on our breath so much, is that what we're trying to do is we are using our focus, which is something only humans can do. We can use our focus to regulate our breath, to bring ourselves out of that panic state, right? We call it the fight or flight state, or that sympathetic dominant state of the
Yeah.
autonomic nervous system. And we bring ourselves back into a relaxed state, even though we're in a stressed situation. So, the benefits of this, of course, there's all kinds of anti-inflammation, immune system benefits. There's cellular biogenesis that occurs, all sorts of wonderful things. But even if those didn't happen, I would still cold train. Like if today, like after years, like I probably wouldn't have started, to be honest. It was those
Yeah.
biological benefits that got me started. But I will say I didn't know at the time just how good it was for my mindset and my focus in everyday life. Because when you're practicing focusing and down regulating into a relaxed state while you're in a stress situation. Just having that practice is applicable to the rest of your life. And uh, I've heard people say that it's stress inoculation. And I love
Hmm.
that term,
I like that too.
because you're giving yourself a little, when you inoculate yourself, you give yourself a little bit of the virus or the bacteria or whatever it is you're inoculating yourself from, so that but it's not enough to kill you, not enough to, really to bring you down. It's just the right amount. And then you come back, your immune system comes back stronger, healthier, more robust. Same basic concept when it comes to our ability to deal with stress when we practice cold immersion training.
It has to be a practice, right? It has to
Yeah.
be something. I've had people come to some of the classes that I offer, or
Hmm.
they'll join a breath work, and no, that was great, and they enjoy it. But I always say this is like day one of millions, I mean, not
Yes.
millions, but thousands, and most people, the response I get is, I have a job, I have kids, I have things, I got to do stuff, how am I going to fit this in
Right.
to this day? How is this even possible? Because your classes are an hour, and like for breath work, I don't have that in the morning. And so
Yeah.
I'll share with you what my practice looks like. And
Yeah.
I know you just released a video on your YouTube about what your daily
Sure.
practice
Sure.
looks
But we
like.
can talk about it. That's fine. That
Um,
sounds great.
but for me, a lot of my breath work happens before I even get out of bed. So for me,
Yeah.
like, instead of hitting snooze, that's been the major change, is like, don't hit
Yeah.
snooze, sit up, do your breath work. I even have an alarm on my phone that says, do your effing breath work.
Yes.
So it reminds me, if I did get up and something happened, it's just like, do your effing breath work and go. And so I just do it in bed, which usually will lead me, depending on what time my first class is, to a meditation. So that for me is just like become routine. But I think a lot of people believe that they need to have, what's being taught, especially if they go to a course or they see something online. They're like, I don't have time for that.
Right.
So if you could kind of talk about your practice, like what that entails on a daily basis, but also what can help motivate people to find a daily practice. And because I can hear it now, time is going to be the resource they don't have, and I want to
Yeah.
be able to share with them how to start.
No, I think you're right on the money there, because you read a lot of books, you see a lot of courses, a lot of methods, techniques out there, and I will say the most popular breath work is the kind that takes a lot of dedicated time, right?
Mhm.
So for instance, you go to YouTube, you see and I don't recommend doing this, even though I'm a YouTuber. I don't recommend going on YouTube and doing some random breath work session, because when you when you do someone else's guided breath work, you are giving them control to your autonomic nervous system. Now, if it may very well be that that person on YouTube is fantastic and trustworthy, but it's very likely that a person on YouTube just threw a bunch of stuff together from, I saw this thing on TV and I saw this thing on the internet and I just put this thing together.
Oh yeah, I've
Now,
seen a lot of like recordings that I know Wim didn't make,
oh yeah,
or that someone else has made, or that's some other breath work, like some holotropic stuff that people just sort of took someone's voice and
yeah.
patched it together with a nice audio clip behind it.
It gets a lot of clicks, right?
Yeah.
And I tell you what, the thing about breath work and this is where we have a lot of work to do, is that breath work, the thing that gets the clicks, the things that get the likes, the views, and all these things, oftentimes are kind of adulterations of what breath work is. So let me come back to the question. I think is a really good question of, hey, I don't have time to do breath work. And here's the reality of it. And this is why I want breath work to be seen as something more than just sitting there and hyperventilating, because it seems like that's all that people want to do now. When it comes to your breath, whether you mean to or not, you are doing breath work. Okay. Now, breath work is the intentional use of breath. But here's the thing: if you are breathing with maladaptations. If your breathing controls so much, and it influences you in a way that is very profound in the way you feel and behave throughout the day, whether you mean for it to happen that way or not. And so when it comes down to it, you're doing it anyway, right? You're going to be breathing all day anyway. So why not do intentional breathing throughout the day? And this doesn't have to be sitting down like you and I do. Every morning, I'm the same way. I'll wake up, I plop down. I'll be literally, my body doesn't stop touching the bed because I plop down and I lean my back up against the bed. But I'll do 15, 20 minutes of breath work, but it's very intentional, very powerful stuff. But hey, not everybody wants to do that. I get that. You don't have to. The most important thing I can tell a person to do, is learn how a breath should actually function.
Yeah.
So learn actually how to recreate that breath wave, because I would say if you're listening to this and you're human, unless you've really worked on it, and I have to work on it every day, right? We have to it's a practice, but you're probably breathing incorrectly, and you're probably breathing in a way that adds more stress to your life. And so if you would just focus on breathing, and we can just start. I'll give you some things for everyone listening. These are the things that are the first steps to being to adding breath work to your full life, right? If you can start by nasal breathing all the time, or at least as often as possible,
Yeah.
and engaging your diaphragm when you breathe. Of course, we teach classes on this, and we'd be happy, to guide you through this, right? But engaging your diaphragm, engaging the full breath wave, and it's not necessarily about, it is about which muscles you're engaging, but it's also about what order you're engaging those muscles, right?
Yeah.
And you can do this when you're driving, whenever you're sitting down, and so step one, breathe through your nose. Step two, try get my book, or talk to Ryan, and learn how a breath should actually function. Step three, okay, step three is practice good posture. Now, yoga is, I can't think of much better than yoga for improving a person's posture. But a person's posture influences the breathing in a way that we don't think about very often. And most of it's a slouching. We've got the upper cross, lower cross syndrome. So, and those three things right there, I have not said anything that requires a person to dedicate any extra time to their life, right? That
No, they
wasn't
can do that just by living and being more
exactly
conscious about it.
right
Yeah.
there. Just simply by doing that, you
You
are
know,
improving your life with your breath. And then beyond that, yeah, we can talk techniques, we can talk cadence, we can talk a lot of things, but simply being mindful of how you breathe,
yeah.
that's right there. I know so many people who practice quote unquote breath work, right? They'll do a 15, 20-minute session, and then the rest of the day, they're mouth breathing, poor posture, over breathing. And even during their initial session, they're engaging their shoulders and their neck, and they're just breathing straight up through the chest only. They're just trying to get high. And so if a person really wants to take control of their health and improve their life through breath, it starts with those fundamentals, right? Beyond that, man, we can go. I mean,
Yeah,
there
so
are
many
so many classes.
techniques and
Yeah,
things.
so
And
much good stuff.
you
But
know, I was reading James Nestor's book, rereading it again, and just because there is a shock factor to the first chapter of that book. Like, it's just where he said exactly what you're reiterating, what he kind of talked about with we need to breathe through our nose because this is what happened when I was breathing through my mouth, and this is when I changed my posture, this is what happened. And I think
yeah,
there's a lot of value to what you just said, because it's true. We don't realize until we're sitting in a doctor's office and he says you have, some lower bronchi issues in your lungs, you not have full lung
mm,
capacity. I mean, when you go in to get your vitals, you start to get into your mid 40s and you have to go see the doctor, and they want to hear
yep.
you breathe, and they want to test your blood pressure, your cholesterol, and
Oh yeah.
some other fun things they want to do to see how you're aging. And it's quite interesting to compare myself. I do
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
to saying this is what my vitals look like because I do a couple simple practices. Now, one of them is a lifestyle. I mean, well, actually, all of them really are, but
All of
like
it. Yeah. Well,
yoga
I'm
itself is a
sure.
lifestyle for me because I teach every day and I'm teaching breath work every day, and getting into the cold has become routine, which is then lifestyle. And it's, I keep a freezer here, and I have luckily, I have a friend of mine who owns a float center, and he has
Ooh, yeah.
has some Japanese soaking tanks, and we use those. But it is it's hard for people to get into the routine if they don't have the resources, and that's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
kind of create here. Because taking a cold shower, wherein it's difficult, I definitely feel different
Yeah.
when I soak, and so I want that to become an option. And so, whether
Right.
that be their own bathtub, a hot tub that you turn cold, a freezer that's sealed up, and for me, my first ice bath that I owned was I just went to the Tractor Supply place and
Oh, yeah.
picked up a horse trough and 100 gallons, and it works, and I still have
Yes.
them, and I use them for courses, so they're really great. But it's very it's very interesting. So we talked a lot about the nervous system, and
Yeah.
that's why we do this. I mean, we practice it because even yoga itself is a practice for the mind. A lot of people
Oh,
think that
yeah.
it's physical, and I reiterate it all the time that yoga is for your mind. We're using the body to go inward. And so
Hmm.
there's there's something called the cannabinoid effect that happens in the nervous system. Then um it, it's affected by that, and and that the cannabinoid system, it plays a significant role in your immune system regulation also. And
Hmm.
I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that in the way of, when people hear cannabinoid, they automatically think what something they can smoke. But and sure, but then there's also the cannabinoids that are produced within us. And I am certainly not the expert in this. You're more familiar with all the chemicals that produce as we're doing breath work, and how our body is really a machine in that way, where it says,
Hmm.
I hear you, you're breathing heavy, I need to produce this. I feel you, you're breathing slow, I need to produce this. Can you talk a little bit about the cannabinoid system, and talk a little bit about norepinephrine and serotonin and how their roles and how they're regulated through breath work a little bit?
Well, I can talk more about um I can talk less about the cannabinoids and more, that is something that, especially anytime your system is, when we talk about the endocannabinoid system, right?
Yeah.
Anytime your system is put through a shock, one of the reactions is to activate that. And so, especially with cold training, that's something we see specifically a lot more in cold training. Now, when it comes to our breath work, um, the the autonomic nervous system is going to give you certain chemicals, depending on the state that you're in, and you can activate your system to the point where you can say, okay, I know what I need at this point. Now, there was a study, especially with norepinephrine. So norepinephrine is the one that I think that's the one that people generally don't realize that they're feeling. And so if you've ever experienced anxiety, you're experiencing norepinephrine. And so in your brain, there's the locus coeruleus, and it'll secrete norepinephrine, and it'll give you more and more of it depending on the situation. And typically the way it works for our everyday life. And this is part of that modern human condition. And then I'm going to talk about how we can use breath work to mitigate that effect,
Yeah.
because that's I think primary, that's the thing that people are going to feel the most. So norepinephrine is generally, we experience it as anxiety. Now, we also experience enormous amount of norepinephrine when we get in the cold as well. And norepinephrine is a neurochemical that is incredibly good for inflammation. So it's an anti-inflammatory. However, it causes us anxiety. And generally how this starts is something we call the dopamine feedback loop, right? And so I talk about this in my book, and it's basically this: there's some kind of uncertainty in your life. your motivational system within your brain says, we need to solve this uncertainty. We need to eliminate this uncertainty. Okay, so feed this person some dopamine. Well, the issue here is our brains are so powerful that we can create um, situations where we're uncertain about something, and there's no way we can actually solve the uncertainty. We're like, what is going to happen tomorrow, for instance?
Mhm.
Or I, does so and so still think about me? Or I wish I wouldn't have said that thing 20 years ago at high school or whatever. So there's all these things, right? And so our brain eventually gets frustrated and says, okay, give the person more dopamine. The dopamine isn't working, so let's kick it up a notch, and then we get the norepinephrine. This can also be um, kicked on through a inconsistent or erratic breathing pattern. So again, going back to your question just a second ago, do I have enough time to do breath work? Well, there have been tests that show that when, especially they had students taking standardized tests, and they observed their breath and they observed their amount of norepinephrine, and they showed that the students who had erratic breathing patterns had higher levels of norepinephrine and didn't do as well on the tests.
Mm.
Now, the reason for that is we all know what it's like to be hyper anxious, right? You can't think straight. You can't, you're just too stressed out. And so what we can do by balancing our breath and by using certain breathing techniques, specifically slowing our breath down and making it an even pattern, or something that is not erratic, right? We can bring those levels down to a manageable, and sometimes just completely bring them down to a manageable level. We need some norepinephrine just to have any kind of focus at all, but we can bring them down to where they're manageable. It's interesting. Norepinephrine also makes us smell, it heightens our senses and makes us more sensitive to everything. But
Mm.
when it comes to uh, really the noticeable differences in the way that we feel, those are the ones that across the board with breath, it has to do with, it's less about necessarily creating so much of the happy chemicals. It's more about balancing and producing a better state with all of the chemicals. Because and I see a lot of people talk about, okay, we're going to do breathing to increase dopamine. And there are cases where people are low in their dopamine levels. There are some problems they might have, but dopamine typically is not something that you're going to have to worry about being low. In fact, in the world we live in today, we talk about the dopamine hits we get from our cell phones, and just think
Yeah.
about, what it does is it compels us to check our cell phone because we might miss out on something. There's an unknown there that we need to solve. So in reality, with breath work, we can reduce a lot of the neurochemicals that cause us so much problems and bring ourselves back into stasis. And this is also what is going to help us create, it reduces those stress hormones, and it helps us to get back into a healthy state. And when you're actually in a healthy state, for many people, they almost feel high. They just feel amazing, right? Now, there
Yeah.
are certain techniques that are altered state techniques, right? We did one of those in during the weekend that you were in Mandala Springs. There are many other altered state techniques as well that possibly create they induce endogenous releases of things like DMT,
Yeah.
oxytocin, things like that. But when it comes down to it, a person who's practicing breath work it's less about adding chemicals, and it's more about balancing the
About balance.
imbalances. Yeah.
There's so many chemicals, right? There's, I mean, I would guess there's even hundreds of them. I don't know how many get released and move throughout our bodies and do all this. And we can only really monitor it by how we feel. I mean, we don't, and now I know that you use some technology, and
Yes.
I wanted to hear a little bit about that. I know you use
Yeah.
some technology, but really for the layman, for those who are just trying this out, their only way to really know that anything is happening is how they feel, right? Or is there
And really,
is there another monitor that they
well,
can do
just
very cheaply?
and I think ultimately developing awareness, like I use some gadgets, but you have to say, I think ultimately awareness is the foundation of all positive change, right? If and when it comes down to it, there's really not even words to describe how we feel. Like we've invented a lot of words, and the words are symbols for thoughts and feelings and emotions and ideas and things like that. But if to really say, how do you feel today, right? Like we can't even really describe pain, right? We have these on a scale of 1 to 10, right? How accurate can that possibly be? So self-awareness and a sense of, we call it introspection, those are vital. And I think that is the most important thing out of anything, is developing that. Because if you don't, then really all the gadgets and devices and things like that are just really, they're useless. And I guess my evidence would be the yogis that figured it out thousands of years
Yeah, they
ago.
didn't have gadgets.
I mean, come on, they didn't have gadgets. They didn't know the physiology that like we know it now. I mean, they knew it. I mean,
I mean, maybe they did. Maybe they did, and we don't know it. Maybe they had some
it
sort of
could
like
be.
alien technology that
Yeah.
was like, you need to increase your blood oxygen
Right.
saturation.
Right. Yeah. It could. That's the next episodes of what is it? Ancient Aliens. But
Yeah.
the thing is, like, I think, and I'll like, for instance, I'll use, you can do it pretty simply. Like, for instance, if you understand, um, kind of how the autonomic nervous system works, you can measure certain things based off of the state that you're in, to kind of have your basics and your baseline. For instance, if you and you can do this, the average, and this is one of those things where you can even do this with to know a little bit more about like your stress level or your state of stress. So for instance, um in the book I talk about this, and we can and I'll just kind of give the instructions here. One of the things, it's not even a gadget you have to buy, but I do use a pulse oximeter. You can use things to monitor your heart rate, your blood pressure, things like that. Those are all really, I mean, there's a reason why they do that at the doctor's office, right? And it's not necessarily for the same purposes as we're doing it when we do with breath, but it does tell you a lot about where you are physiologically, and so you can use those. But a very simple thing you can do literally is you take a very deep breath in through your nose, fill your lungs completely, and then exhale through your nose for as long as you can, and basically try to make that exhale last all day if you could, right? And you just time how long it takes for that exhale to occur, and you stop your timer whenever you either need to take another breath, or if that exhale is interrupted in any way, or if you swallow. And what that does, essentially, it lets you know a few things. Now, if you swallow, people always wonder about that one, right? So if you swallow, think about this. In that case, what you're doing, first of all, what you're doing is you're testing your CO2 tolerance, but you're also testing how much CO2 you're producing. So there's two ways that we work with CO2, and CO2 is it's the most stress inducing chemical that life comes in contact with. So they've done studies with fruit flies, and pretty much everybody hates CO2. Um, but whenever you have elevated stress levels, you actually produce more CO2. And this is because if you're in a state of fight or flight, okay, so if you're in a state of fight or flight, well, there's a few things that happen. One, your blood sugar goes up. Two, your rate of breathing goes up, so you're oxygenating more. So you actually, and your bronchi open, your alveoli, everything opens up so it can facilitate a better gas exchange, because your body is preparing to use energy. So it's going to create more cellular energy, and so your heart's pumping and all these things. Well, you can literally, if you do a breathing session or something like that, and and then after the breathing session, you take a CO2 test. You can, even without a device, right? You can infer just what state you're in. And the longer your exhale, now it also depends on your CO2 tolerance. Okay. But if you take your tolerance in the morning, you know the tolerance and just make the assumption that when you woke up, you're not in the state of fight or flight, or at least you're as close to rest and digest as possible. But you can even determine just simply with a stopwatch and your breath, okay, how stressed am I? Have I changed my state?
Yeah. So what's the baseline on that? Like what's average human and what's superhuman
Yeah.
and
So yeah, so if you get 20 or below, you're very stressed. You're very stressed.
20 seconds.
Or yeah, 20 seconds or below. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, 20 minutes. But if it's 20 seconds or below, you're very, very stressed, and or you have a low CO2 tolerance. But if we see anybody with that low of a score, it's not just the CO2 tolerance. There is a high level of stress in that individual.
Gotcha.
From
Yeah,
20,
that's usually the where from my breath work where so like I know that I can go without oxygen because I'm super ventilated. I'm like, yep, I'm
right.
good.
Yeah.
But I do feel the CO2 buildup
Yes.
where part of me wants to go, I can still hold, I don't need more oxygen.
Yeah.
I don't need that, but I need to release this CO2. And
Yeah.
you know what? I'm like, how do I keep holding my breath? I mean, especially as you get into longer and you start practicing. I mean, when I go over 4 minutes sometimes, but when I get to
Wow.
that, my CO2 levels are through the roof, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I need to release this. And I
Yeah.
don't know if there's a way around that other than just training. I don't think you can still have a breath retention and release CO2 and not get more oxygen. I don't know if the body will allow you to do that.
CO2 will eventually override your voluntary control over your breath. So eventually, yeah, we have voluntary control over our breath, and that's something, that's why we're able to speak right now, right? We can
Yeah.
actually decide when to breathe. But eventually the brain will override that once you get to a certain level of CO2, and it's going to be painful. Yeah, and you know this, right? If you're
Yeah.
doing 4-minute breath holds, I mean, you get to a level of pain and anxiety. I mean, you can feel
Oh,
incredible
it's through the
anxiety.
roof usually. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
usually through the roof, and I'm like, I got to take a breath now.
Yeah.
But man, when I do that, when I take that breath, it's a beautiful breath.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's
Oh, yeah.
happiness, and I think that's really where in those moments right after the long hold, so that I found a lot of self-realization in the cold. I mean, that's
Yes.
whether that be mindset, whether that be just inspired action about things that I want to do in my life, or even just directions that are beyond my thinking mind that come
Yes.
from nature. And in India they call it Ishwara. Ishwara is God, but it's everything. It's
Yeah.
everything. It's nature, it's the tree, it's your water, it's everything is Ishwara. And so when I immerse myself into this state of Ishwara, self-realization is kind of the product of that. And call it inspired action, call it inspiration, whatever you want to call it. But I think also after those retentions, sometimes when we do breath work and you take that breath and then you feel the nervous system, the electrical system light up, you hear it in your ears, you feel it in your fingers,
Mm-hmm.
and you're squeezing that newfound breath in, and you're kind of visualizing chakras. For me, I'm drawing it up the chakra system, almost like a kundalini rising.
Sure.
And I think all that happens, but a lot of people are quite skeptical about using the word enlightenment or self-realization,
Yeah.
uh, because those are words meant for only monks, right? And or the Buddha. That's those are the only people that can
Right.
do that. And so I wanted to hear from you kind of what you think self-realization means to you in your practice in general, and what you would tell to someone if they said, hey, will this practice help me find self-realization?
That's wow. Okay. So I'm getting all these questions I've never gotten before. I'm having a good time. So, okay. So when it comes to self-realization, for me, I, and I love your where you're coming from an Eastern point of view. For me, I am a very much Western minded individual when it comes to the world of philosophy and and um, I'm an English professor as well. So I've been an English professor for about 10 years or a little over 10 years. So philosophy and stuff like that is kind of steeped in Western stuff.
Yeah.
So for me, when I think about self-realization, I start thinking about existential philosophy and the question of whether you discover who you are or you decide who you are, and the the ideas of when it comes to self-realization, who am I really? Jung, the psychoanalyst, or
Oh, Carl Jung.
yeah, Carl Jung, he was a psychologist. I don't know why I couldn't think of that.
Yeah.
But the psychologist Carl Jung, he said that I am both accepting who I am and deciding who I am going to be. And I think there's a really beautiful tension there that is self-realization, in that there's a certain degree of honesty we have to have with who am I really, and we have to look at ourselves, I think, in a way that says, maybe I'm a scoundrel. Maybe I am, maybe there are flaws, maybe there are things that I don't necessarily like about myself. Maybe there are things that I love about myself. It's all me. And I you were talking about yoga, not necessarily, it's part of the mind, right? And I think we agree, it's everything, right? It's like there is no mind and body, it's all one thing. And when it comes to um, existentialism, Henry David Thoreau, he wrote a lot of, he was influenced heavily actually by Hinduism, and he wrote the poem Brahma. And but in basically he says that we have to be ourselves. We have to be ourselves. Now, he believed that we're all connected with one common soul, right? The oversoul, right? And so we have to be ourselves for all of us to be expressed. Now, for me, I think it's incredibly important. I don't know about the spiritual stuff. I don't really have a particular claim there, but I think it is maybe a matter of faith, in my opinion, that we all have to be ourselves, and that means we have a lot of work to do, because it's very easy. And I'll come back to Jung, or Jung. He said that we're all born original, but most of us die as facsimiles, right? It's
Mm.
so easy to pattern ourselves off of this guru or that sports hero, or whomever, right? And not think for ourselves. And I think it is essential, even if a person absolutely, I can't agree with anything they have to say. I think it's absolutely important that that person exists as him or herself. And I think, and that, again, that for me, that's a matter of faith, because I don't know if it's really true. But I think it's essential. Now, when it comes to the practice of breath work and how it brings us to that, here is how it happened for me, and how it happens for me is that it's so, I think, for most of us, we decide not to be who we really are out of fear. We are afraid to, we're afraid to be, to listen to ourselves. We're afraid to be who we really want to be. And then also, we're afraid to actually look within and do that kind of deep work that is required to look inside of ourselves. And so one of the things that I have found with breath work now, and this is specifically more of an altered state, is that it helps us break through a lot of these blockages that we have from whatever it was. For some people it's trauma, for other people it's they grew up just, it's better not to think for myself, I'm just going to do what people want me to do, because then people are happy with me, and I want people to be happy with me, right? I think there's so many things that we pick up through our lives that we have to work our way through later on in life. And I know there's some people that never picked up any problematic things or maladaptive behaviors, but I would be willing to bet it's got to be close to 9 out of 9, right?
I
But
would say that everyone
yeah,
has healing that needs to be done,
right.
in some form or fashion, even if it's simply the narrative that we carry. The narrative that is I am this
Yeah.
prevents us from evolving. It prevents us
Yeah. Yeah.
from
Oh,
moving
I love
forward.
that. Yeah, exactly. Why would that have to be set in stone, right?
Yeah, it's
Why?
like saying I don't do the cold. That well, that's just a narrative you created for yourself. I don't do the cold.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't do yoga. I don't do the, and that's a narrative that someone created, which I preface that saying that it needs healing, and that's up to them to decide. But what I think that it's done is it's created a limiting name badge that says this is who I am and this is all I'm ever going to be. And whereas when we go into deep breath work or and cold and mindset training, we go beyond that. That is our our incarnation,
Hmm.
and we go into something that's quite a bit deeper. And I think the ancient yogis knew that,
Hmm.
and we're just learning to kind of bring that back. And I think breath work itself, even if it is not spiritual in nature as you're presenting it, it
Hmm.
is spiritually received, because I think that our breath is the doorway into our soul. Because we have these
Yeah.
parts of the brain. I know you talk about, we have our frontal cortex, and we have our limbic, and we
Right.
have our brain stem, and that's very simplified. But to get really into our limbic system, I consider it a kind of a tether to our heart coherence.
Hmm.
Our Joe Dispenza talks a lot about that, about heart coherence. And to get into that, we need to go beyond the memory and the narrative that rests in our neocortex, and
Hmm.
go a little deeper.
Hmm.
And that to me is a very spiritual experience. It can be, because
Yeah.
we see it as we facilitate, where there's a release of emotion, and there is profound thought, and there is also just peace. And even if it's just peace, where you can sit quiet with yourself while you're in the cold, let's just say 90 seconds,
Hmm.
that is a spiritual ceremony. It is
Yeah.
ceremony. and
Yeah.
and I think humans have been involved in ceremony ever since. They've been involved with drum circles and the moon and whatever, and we've done breath work, and we've done things with plant medicines, and it's always been ceremony. And I think as humans we've forgotten how to breathe because we're very conditioned to comfort. But
Hmm.
now, as we as breath work is being popularized, it's because people are kind of sick of the Western way of, like, let's just put a medication on it. Let's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
let's just stick you into a hospital. And I think humans are saying there's got to be a better way than over medicating me.
Hmm.
And so we're finding that, and there's so many systems out there, right? I mean, I get ads served to me all the time, because our phones are always listening. They
Yeah.
know that I'm doing breath work, and they want to serve me an ad for this particular program and that book and this thing and this course. And I think that all of them maybe have some value, but there's also like a really good and clean path. And I want to talk about that, as those who are listening to this, because I know that you're in the middle of a 6-week course,
Yeah. That's right.
and you have a certification coming up. If I believe that I
Correct.
heard that, which I
Right.
think I'm going to be participating in. So I want to hear more about that.
Awesome. Yeah. So one of the things that I really and just kind of to to just kind of set that stage and piggyback on what you're talking about. Um, the world of breath work is blooming right now, and it's this amazing, beautiful movement. There are also a lot of misconceptions, I think. And so what I'm trying to do, and like you said, there's all these different this method and that technique and this system and whatever. Um, Everybody wants to have a brand, and what I'm trying to do is just really say, listen, it's all working with the same things, really. I mean, if you have lungs, if you have a brain, if you have a body, it's all working with the same things. So there's a lot of people say, well, this is the one that I do. Okay, I do this one. That's the thing that's, and I don't want breath work to turn into what I've seen in fitness and nutrition um, and in pretty much everything else.
Oh, it's
Where
in yoga too.
yeah, exactly. You see it all the time, and it's and even Pilates, and like they have everything that is good, and even let's just face it, medicine is good. It's just that it got adulterated, just like everything else. And I don't want to see breath work get that way. And so what I'm doing is I do a 6-week intensive class, and I call the 6-week breath mastery class. Now this is a course that we do online, and it's not a pre-recorded online course and now I probably will eventually have a pre-recorded online course to offer, but I want to try to always do a live online course. And what we do is every week we get together for 2 hours a week. It's one 2 hour session, and we cover different elements of breath. And so, what I want my students after 6 weeks, the whole point is to be able to create your own personalized breath practice that's perfect for you. It's not mine. It's not Ryan's. It's not, you know what I'm saying? It's going to be your own. And also, the thing about the breath, it just like all humans, we're all different, and we don't come off on a assembly line or something like that. So I teach my students how to test things. We cover all the foundations of breath, and then really once you finish it, you'll be able to look at any breathing technique, whatever system that somebody comes at you with, and be able to even just look at it and say, this is probably what they're trying to do. Okay, okay, they're doing this on the exhale. Okay, I get what they're trying to do here. Oh, they're holding the breath for this long. Okay, I understand what this thing does for most people. Now, for me, I've already tested, and I know that it doesn't necessarily do that for me. I want people to be that knowledgeable, because I don't want people to come around. I always hate it when people are the paleo is the only way. No, it's carnivore. No, it's vegan. It's like, okay, you're dealing with human physiology. So get to know your own human physiology and then understand the principles that you're working with. Then you can move on. Now, that is step one. And for most people, that's intense, right? And this is not just a class that if you want to learn a few techniques to relax, take this class. This is if you really want to fully understand breath work, this may be the last course you'll ever have to take. And then once you're done with that, now they're live classes, you have access to the recordings for as long as you want. You can always rewatch them on demand. There's homework, there's guided sessions that I give people for homework. And the goal is at the end, you're pretty adept at breath work. It's not the end of your training, because we understand it's got to be a practice, right? But you're equipped with the tools to really have a really fruitful practice the rest of your life. Now, what I'm doing from there is, that is step one. If you would like to become a certified breath worker under me, and what we're going to be doing is we have one more course, a 6-week breath course. It's going to be in June that this one starts, and it'll again go for six weeks, and then I'll continue to have those, but we're going to start enrollment for the breath school, and it's not available yet, but it will be available for everyone who's taken these courses. You'll get an email and an invitation to apply. We're not taking everybody. This is especially for the first class. We want to make sure the first class is really set up to succeed, and so we'll go from there, and um, we'll meet electronically. We'll meet via Zoom, and we'll do sessions where we cover all the different aspects of breath in greater detail. And then we get together. I've found a place in Silverton, Colorado,
Ooh,
where we're going to have our master training practicals.
that's
And
close to me. So
yes,
you have to take the 6-week course first,
yes,
and then you take the mastery. Okay,
correct. Now,
got it.
again, if you take the 6-week course, it doesn't necessarily mean you're trying to become an instructor or get certified. Many people will take this. Many people they've taken the 6-week course. A lot of people took the first one and then they signed up again because it was
Yeah.
that
Okay.
good. And so if you really just want to really deep dive, if you want to just say, I want to understand how my breath works, maybe I'm not interested in becoming an instructor, still the 6-week breath mastery course is for you. But if you'd like to get certified under me, I will, and this again, this is for, and you can apply these principles and you can say, okay, I'm an athletic coach, great, or I'm a yoga teacher, or I'm a, whatever. I just want to help people with addiction. Is one guy, he's already told me, he's like, I'm in the recovery world, and I want to be able to use these principles. Whatever you want to use it, you'll have a good enough breadth of breath work to be able to apply that to whatever it is you want to do. So we're going to cover also things, basically making your passion into a profession. So a lot of the things I wish someone would have told me, but there just wasn't anybody in the space, right? It's kind of,
Right.
it's kind of a new space, right? And so a lot of the things I wish people would have taught me, I'll be teaching to this first class. So I'm really excited about that. Again, signups should be this fall for applications, and then it'll be a real quick turnaround as far as acceptance into the master class, and then the final practicals will be in June of 2022.
So let's talk about where to find that. So tell
Yeah.
me, what is your
So,
website?
so you go to
or-
jessecoomer.com and you can go under courses. And right now you can't sign up for, you have to sign up for the 6-week breath mastery class. And what
For
we
June?
do,
Is that available
for
now?
June, it'll be available in, let's see, it's currently not, but when this goes on, let me just give you the date that it should be available by for the June class. It should be available by May 14th.
Okay, so May
So
14th, they can sign up, and
yeah,
then June, you start the class, you do 6 weeks, and then you're ready for going to Colorado to do the
you're ready to apply.
apply.
So I can't guarantee everybody that applies will actually be accepted.
Space is limited. Yeah,
It
gotcha.
is a limited thing. And again, I want to make sure a person's really serious. I want, and so there will be an application process. But
Yeah,
yeah, that's when that class will start. The first class will go through, and we're going to change the world, man. I mean, you
yeah.
know how needed this is, and especially with the things that have been happening in the past year or so. I don't think we've seen, sadly enough, I don't think we've seen the psychological ramifications of the past year or so. I think we're going to be dealing with that, and it's something where I know there's a lot of healing that needs to be done. And guess what? We're here, and this is what this is. Maybe this is why we're here right now. I tend to believe so. So I'm really excited about helping, being a helpful force in this world, and change the world for the better.
Oh, that's beautiful. Because that's, I mean, when I quit my corporate job and I decided to move to India, I mean,
Mm.
that was kind of like my, most people write a 2 week notice that says things like, I'm leaving you because you do this. And my 2 week notice was, I'm going to live a life of service for others and for myself, and not for a corporation. And that was part of my 2 week notice, is that I was
Yeah,
going to be of service. And so every time that I find that I'm discouraged, or especially when pandemic happened and we were shutting everything down, I
right,
couldn't teach, and we found technology as a resource to help us with that.
right.
uh, I said, okay, I'm back. I'm back, and I can help. So I'm certainly. I mean, that's my route. I mean, I want to try to get to Poland early next
Yes.
year.
Yeah,
Um,
becoming Wim Hof Method certified, I think, would be a great thing too.
yeah,
And for those listening, you go to wimhofmethod.com, you can apply for their academy there too. So
yeah,
I think you would love all of that. That would be
yeah. That's what I'm planning on. I think they have a call scheduled for August with
awesome.
someone, and then I believe it's in January to go to Poland. So that's what I'm hoping for. And then I would like to talk further about doing this course, because
Yeah,
it's something that I use and teach now. And I know that I mean, you've done a lot of research on the science, and just backing it with the practice. And I think that's where we need to be. I mean, even Wim talks about that, saying that's great that you feel good, and that's great that this is happening for you. But we want to show with science why. We want to show
Yes. Yes.
that it's like not just like a really good feel good thing, that's sort of in metaphysics. We want it
Right.
to be something that's science and saying, this is why you feel good. This is what's happening in your body. And I think
Hmm.
that that really is where those who are skeptical, who are saying,
Yeah.
whatever, I don't have the time, I would do it, but it's cold. I think that's where they'll say, well, yeah, but this shows norepinephrine levels. This shows my oxygen levels. This shows the healing that's happened in my body. I know our friend Rob has a really powerful
Yes.
story about his own healing
Oh
with
my God.
Raynaud.
Yeah.
And like to show that and go, I don't have these symptoms anymore. And the only thing that has changed is that
Yeah.
I've begun to breathe properly.
I mean, it seems like there's no way that could cause such an enormous change in the way we look at life and the way we feel. And
Yeah, it does
but
though.
it does. I mean, it's just incredible the changes that have happened in my own life and in the life of my clients and your life and Rob's life and all of our. I mean, it's just incredible. So I think this is just the beginning of one of the most underreported movements in history. And if we can reach out, and again, this is the beautiful thing. Like I'm going to be certifying people under myself, but I'm not asking people to be clones, right? I am so happy. You come from an Eastern worldview. I'm going to come from a Western worldview because guess what? It's about. It's not about me. It's about getting the public into it. So there's going to be
Yeah.
some people I can speak to, and they're gonna say, yeah, I'm hearing exactly what you're putting down. And somebody you're going to speak to, same way. We could be saying the exact same thing, right? But only it's like, I kind of like the way Ryan was saying it better, and it's just like, well, okay, it doesn't matter. And that's the beauty behind, you know, really all of us coming around this one common goal of breath and just helping the world take a deep breath and a sigh of relief, if nothing else.
A sigh, a breath of relief.
Yeah.
Yeah, a giant breath of relief. It is such a fantastic thing to see changes not only in myself and the way I use the duality of response versus react.
Hmm.
And I see such a change. I was telling you before we started, but I had an incident with my laptop,
Yeah.
it was gone. It got wet. It was gone. And I was certainly in fight or flight mode
Oh
because
yeah.
I didn't know what to do. I've never had a laptop saturated by water. And so
Oh no.
your initial reaction is to freak out, but because we live in this world where we practice things, I go, I remember this sensation. I remember that this
Yep.
is fight or flight.
Yep.
Okay, I can either I can react and scream and holler and swear, or I can say, this will pass. This is me
Yep.
breathing. This is me sitting in it. This is me letting it whirl around me.
Hmm.
And then on the other side of that, we find that we are able to respond in a way that is healthy,
Yes.
that is communicating with others, and also that doesn't perpetuate building these walls
Yeah.
that keep us away from our healing. So, it's
Yeah.
just a matter of saying things happen. Okay, now let's work with them. And so, that's where I find breath work has been the most helpful for me and for a lot that have been around me. Is just like they don't want to stress anymore. They don't want to be anxious anymore. They just want to
Yeah.
say, I have a tool that is not a pill, a breather. It's not all these things. It's just me. One of my favorite poets, a guy named Young Pueblo. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's a wonderful poet, and he wrote the he said, true power is living the realization that you are your own healer,
Mm.
hero, and leader.
Yes. Oh, I
True
love that.
power.
I love
True
that.
power.
Yeah.
We can have all these other little things, but I think being a breath worker is a
Yeah.
superpower. And so
Yeah. Yeah. I wake
you
up
have
every morning.
superpowers, Jesse.
I can't believe it. Every morning I wake up, I can't believe it. It's like, wow, this thing works.
Yeah, you have superpowers. Well, so they can the best ways to get a hold of you. I know you have your channel. I am Jesse
Yeah.
Coomer, right?
I'm Jesse Coomer on Instagram, and then on YouTube, you just go YouTube/Jesse Coomer, JESSECOOMER, or you can go to jessecoomer.com for all of my links. That's JESSECOOMER, and you can check out all my offerings.
Your book is the best place to get it, is there, or should you get it on
Yeah,
Amazon?
if you go to my website, or you can go to Amazon, but if you go to my website, it's linked there. On Amazon, it's available in an ebook, paperback, and an Audible.
Right on. And you narrated the Audible, is that right?
I didn't narrate the actual Audible. So here's how it worked for that. I don't actually have the equipment to really do it right.
Yeah.
Because they're very specific, that particular, whenever you do for Audible. So you'll hear me in the beginning, and I kind of introduce the guy who reads it, and at the end I think it's like 5 or 6, I forget how many hours it is. It's not 5 or 6 hours, but 5 or 6 sessions that are guided breathwork sessions. So a lot of the breathwork sessions that you read in the back of my book that are samples for this or that.
Oh, gotcha.
I guide you through. There's music. Actually, Rob did some of the music, and
oh yeah, right
so it's so that is also available on Audible. You can get it through, and if you go to my website, there's links to all of it as well.
Got it. Well, it's 200 pages of goodness. I love it.
Thank you.
And refer to it pretty often. Really, especially just just some of the techniques and the science again is what's key for me. Just to going, yeah, that's why that happened. Okay, got it. So go into your sites, check you out, and I know that you have some upcoming workshops. We talked about the one on the 15th. Unfortunately, I will not be able to get to that one this month, but I do plan on getting in the cold with you again.
Yes,
we need to plan something for like the winter out here in Utah, because I think
I'd love to.
I talked to Rob about coming out here for that also, to do a little climbing and getting into the cold. So maybe we offline we'll talk about that and coordinate something where we can do a few cold dips here in the desert. So
all right, I love it. Sounds great.
Well, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate you. We'll chat soon. I'm going to talk to you offline about those other offerings, but Jesse, it's been a pleasure. Amazing. I'm going to go watch your video. I know you're releasing a video today. So
yes, thanks so much. Yeah, you'll see a lot of me eating stuff with Rob off the ground. So
yeah, dandelions and weird things we can't pronounce.
Exactly. Thanks so much for having me, Ryan.
Much love, brother. Talk to you soon.
You too.